Hey guys, what's up? It's Savannah. Welcome back to my channel and welcome back to another true crime video. Before we get started, I want to apologize for the appearance. I have been working like a mad woman on Halloween for this year, and filming this video, I just did not have time to do, I can't even say full glam, literally just half glam. My hair is still wet from the shower. I'm not wearing any makeup, so I apologize. Before we get started, I want to thank the two sponsors for this video. The first sponsor we have today is Solid Gold. If any of you are pet owners out there, you know the importance of feeding your pet with the proper nutrients that they deserve. And Solid Gold's nutritional platform is inspired by their founding belief that high quality food is the best way to impact our pet's mind, body, and spirit. For over 45 years, Solid Gold has revolutionized the holistic pet food category, and they have a recipe for any dog or cat's dietary needs, including healthy whole grain and grain-free options, wet food, dry food, and supplements. Solid Gold foods are different because they cleanse the digestive system with whole superfoods, balance with living probiotics, and fuel with omega-3 and 6 fatty acids. My dogs absolutely love Solid Gold. I gave it to them a couple weeks ago for them to try out, and they have been hooked on it ever since. So if any of you are pet owners out there thinking about trying something new, I highly recommend Solid Gold. And if you guys want to receive 30% off select products, all you have to do is go to solidgoldpet.com/killer. Again, that is just solidgoldpet.com/killer. So thank you, Solid Gold, for sponsoring this video. And the second sponsor we have today, you guys, is BetterHelp. And if you've never heard of BetterHelp, BetterHelp is an online counseling service that gives you professional counseling in the comfort of your own home. Once you sign up for BetterHelp, you will then be paired with a counselor, and BetterHelp has counselors in tons of different specialties such as anxiety, depression, relationships, LGBTQ+ matters, sleeping, family trauma, and more. BetterHelp is available worldwide, and financial aid is available for those who qualify, and you guys will be able to contact your counselor while using BetterHelp at any time of the day, whether that's just texting them throughout the day or having set up meetings through FaceTime, Zoom, or any other way that you guys choose to communicate. So if you guys want to receive 10% off your first month of BetterHelp, all you have to do is go to betterhelp.com/instinct. Again, that's just betterhelp.com/instinct. Thank you, BetterHelp, for sponsoring this video. Now let's move on into today's case. So as you guys can tell by the title of today's episode, today we are talking about the unsolved brutal murder of Veronica Anderson. Veronica was only 42 years old when she was brutally murdered on the early morning hours of August 25th, 1991 in Warrington, located in the UK. Veronica went by Vera. That is what her friends and family called her, and that is what we are going to be referring to her as today. Vera was an amazing mother of two. She had a son and a daughter, and at the time of her death, her daughter was 19 years old and her son Neil was 7 years old. Vera was described by her family as a loving and devoted mother. Her kids were her absolute world, and Vera was also really looking forward to this next chapter in her life because her 19-year-old daughter Lorraine was actually pregnant with her first child. So Vera was so excited on becoming a grandmother. She couldn't be more thrilled, and she was just really looking forward to taking on that title as a grandmother. Vera was a single mom, and her kids lived in Cheshire, and Vera actually ran a business with her daughter Lorraine and another woman as well, and their business was supplying sandwiches to other factories and local businesses in the area. So they would make these sandwiches and then pass them out to other businesses. So overall, Vera was living a relatively normal life leading up to her murder. However, things changed very quickly. So let's talk about what happened on the night of August 24th, 1991. Now, this was a Saturday night, and it started out as any typical Saturday night for Vera. Vera's 19-year-old daughter Lorraine was actually out this night, so it was just Vera and her son Neil at her home together. And at this time, Neil had already gone to bed. He was upstairs sleeping. Again, he was only 7 years old, so he went to bed fairly early, and Vera was downstairs in the living room watching TV. Now, because there is really no witness to see what unfolded this night, all we know is that at some point, Vera received a phone call at her home. She received a phone call from from a caller who is to this day never been identified. So we still don't know who this caller is. However, whoever was on the other end of the line prompted Vera to call her neighbor and ask her neighbor if she would be able to babysit her son Neil for a little bit. Vera said she was only going to be gone for about 10 minutes, and the neighbor agreed. She said of course she would watch Neil. So Vera ended up waking up her son and bringing him over to the neighbor's house. Now, when Vera got to the neighbor's house and dropped off Neil, she told her neighbor that she was going to go pick up her brother. That is where she was going. She wouldn't be gone long, and it was very clear that Vera left with the intention of returning because she left her purse at her house and she also left the TV on in her living room. So those are two very clear signs that wherever Vera went that night, she went with the intention of coming back. Now, along with this, something that the neighbor pointed out this night was that Vera, before she left, actually emptied the trunk of her car. She took out the things that were already in her trunk out of them as if she was making room to put something new into the trunk. However, what she was planning on putting into the trunk has never been clear. Now, Vera left at about 10:15 p.m. on August 24th. That is when she left her neighbor's house, and no one knew that when Vera left that night, it would be the last time that she would ever be seen again. Now, on the early morning hours of the next day, which was August 25th, Vera's car, which is a Ford Cortina, was found parked at the Old Tannery Complex. Now, the Old Tannery Complex back in 1991 consisted of abandoned buildings, and it did have a reputation as being somewhat of a lover's lane for couples. Couples would go there to have privacy. Along with that, it also was known to have some drug deals go on sometimes. So because of the reputation, which authorities knew about, authorities patrolled the area typically. And this night on August 24th and in the early morning hours of the 25th was no different. A police car was said to have patrolled the Old Tannery area at about 10:45 p.m. on August 24th, which was about 30 minutes after Vera left the neighbor's home. However, when the police car passed Old Tannery at that time, they said that there weren't any cars in the area, so they continued on their regular route. So you can imagine the confusion when Vera's car was then discovered by authorities at 3:18 a.m. on August 25th. And not only did authorities find Vera's car, they also found Vera brutally murdered inside of it. When Vera's body was found, she was found slumped over the steering wheel and her throat had been slit. Not only had her throat been slit, but she had also been strangled. And when the medical examiner conducted an autopsy on Vera, it was actually concluded that the strangulation happened post-mortem. So she was strangled after she already died, which is a huge sign of overkill, but we'll get into that in a little bit. Now, when Vera was found, she was found with all of her clothes on. She was fully clothed. Her clothes didn't look ripped up or torn, and there were also no signs of sexual assault. There were also no signs of a murder weapon on the scene. Like I said, Vera's throat was slit. That was her cause of death. However, there was no murder weapon found, and to this day, the knife that was used to slit Vera's throat has never been discovered. However, when authorities were canvassing the crime scene, they did find two pieces of evidence that had been left behind. The first piece of evidence was a blood-stained cotton glove, and the second piece of evidence was a sash cord, which is basically a thin rope that was used to tie curtains, but it's just basically a thin rope. So those were the two pieces of evidence left behind, and authorities to this day aren't certain if the rope was actually used in the act of the murder. It could have just been left there by someone by accident or fallen out of someone's pocket. There's never been anything to indicate that it was used during the murder. However, it was found on the crime scene. However, the blood-stained glove was 100% used by the killer, and we'll get into that in a second. Now, according to the medical examiner, they concluded that Vera passed away sometime between 11:30 p.m. and 2:45 a.m. on August 25th. Now, the news of Vera's murder absolutely stunned the community. Everyone was completely shaken up by it. Nothing like this had ever happened before, and people were scared. Everyone was really, really scared that this could happen again and it could happen to them. So because of this, the public was very, very vocal with authorities. Authorities were actually able to collect over 6,500 statements from the public. However, ultimately, unfortunately, none of these statements led to anything. Now, Lorraine was actually the one that had to identify her mother, Vera, and I can't even imagine that, being pregnant at 19 and having to identify your mother after her brutal, brutal murder. For Lorraine said the hardest part of all of this was having to explain to Neil, her 7-year-old brother, what happened. She said that was absolutely the hardest part of this entire thing. Now, when authorities were conducting their investigation on the crime scene, they tried to see if they could pick up any forensic evidence from Vera's car. However, they found nothing there as well. And even though there were 6,500 statements that were put in by the public, there were no witnesses who came forward and said that they heard any sign of a struggle or any screaming coming from Vera's car that night. So along with all of the dead ends that authorities were coming to in trying to narrow down who could be responsible for this, another thing police were trying to figure out was motive. Police could not find a motive. No one knew why anyone would want to hurt Vera so viciously. She was a single mom. She loved her kids. Her family was her world. She was very low key. So why would anyone want to hurt her? Now, even though there were no witnesses who came forward saying that they saw anything suspicious at the crime scene, there were multiple witnesses who came forward and said that on the night of August 24th, there was a woman who matched Vera's description seen at the Crown and Cushion pub. Now, Vera was not known to be a regular at this pub. However, it was located very close to Vera's house. It was a maximum 10-minute drive away. And witnesses said that this woman, who is believed to be Vera, was seen with a man at this pub. This man has been described as a white male between the ages of 30 to 40 years old, standing at about 5'8" to about 5'11" tall. He had short, light brown hair and a mustache, and he was described as having a thinner build. And on this particular night, he was seen wearing a yellowish/tan colored jacket. Now, witnesses said that the two of them didn't necessarily seem like they were on a date. They didn't seem very affectionate or flirty, but they did seem like they knew each other. It seemed like this was not their first encounter together. And it is also important to note that none of the people that were at the Crown and Cushion pub that night remember seeing these two leave together, whoever these people are, whether it was Vera or not. No one remembers seeing these two leave at all. So whether they left together or they left separately, no one saw them leave. Now, based off of witness statements, police did come up with a composite sketch of what the man looked like at the Crown and Cushion pub that night, and I'm going to pop up the picture right here so you can see that. Now, another witness did come forward and said that at 11:00 p.m. on August 24th, a car matching Vera's description was seen at Old Tannery, and it was seen with the headlights on. Now, as far as distance goes from the Crown and Cushion pub to Old Tannery, it's about a 2-minute drive, so it's not far at all. It would have been very easy for Vera to go to the Crown and Cushion pub and then directly to Old Tannery. She would have been there in about 2 minutes, so it's not a stretch. Now, there was a man named Kenneth Adamson, and where Kenneth lived, he actually overlooked Old Tannery, and he said that on the night of the 24th, he remembers looking outside the window of his home and seeing a car with the headlights on. Now, this car is presumed to be Vera's car because it matched the description. And according to Kenneth, he said that this happened a lot. Like I said, this was a lover's lane. People like to go there a lot. So seeing a car there with the headlights on was not something out of the ordinary. So when Kenneth saw this, it didn't spark any real reaction with him. So he just left it alone. However, when he ended up hearing about what happened to Vera, he came forward to police and told them what he remembered. There was another another witness that was actually a couple, and they came forward and said that at about 1:30 a.m. on August 25th, the two of them were walking home. Their names are Robert and Eileen Thomas. And the two of them were walking home after being out at a club, and they walked past Old Tannery. And when they walked past it, they also saw a car matching Vera's description with the headlights on. However, the two of them just assumed that it was a couple just enjoying the privacy, if you catch my drift, and they left it alone because that's what this place had a reputation for, so they didn't think anything weird about it. Then the next time Vera's car was seen was at 3:18 a.m. when authorities discovered it. So authorities were the one again who discovered Vera's car and her body inside of it. Now, based off of the evidence found at the crime scene, especially the glove, authorities were able to conclude that this was not just some random attack. This was not a blitz attack. This was premeditated because whoever attacked Vera wore this glove with the purpose of not leaving any fingerprints or DNA behind. So they were able to think far enough ahead as to wearing this glove while carrying out the murder. Now let's talk about this glove for a second. So this glove was an off-white colored glove made from a brand called Minette. And after the glove went through forensic examination, it was confirmed that the glove did come in contact with Vera and that it had been worn by the killer. Authorities believe that the killer dropped the glove by mistake when leaving the scene. Now, there actually was another man who came forward during all of this, and this man was actually a taxi driver. And he said that at about 1:30 a.m. on August 25th, he ended up picking up this guy. He picked him up about a half a mile away from the Crown and Cushion pub, and he was asked to take him about 100 yards away from where Vera's house was. The taxi driver described the man as being in his 30s, and he was wearing a raincoat. But what stood out to the taxi driver the most was this man's hand, because this man's hand was clearly injured. His right hand was wrapped in a handkerchief, and his knuckles were all scraped up, so it definitely looked like he had beat his hand up pretty badly. But the taxi driver didn't ask him about it, and the man didn't say anything about it, so there was nothing that ever really came from that. And to this day, that man has never been identified. Now, is it possible that he has absolutely nothing to do with Vera's murder? Absolutely. However, looking at how close he was to where Vera was that night and his hand, and then wanting to be dropped off 100 yards from where Vera's house was, it definitely is very strange. Now, as far as the investigation goes, like I said, authorities collected about 6,500 statements from the public, and they even went as far as traveling to Europe on several different occasions to follow up on different leads. However, this ended up leading them to nothing. And at the time, there was a $38,000 reward for anyone who could provide any information as to who Vera's killer was. However, this case is still unsolved, so that never ended up happening. Now, while conducting their investigation, authorities looked into Vera's social life because they wanted to look at everyone she hung out with, because obviously Vera's murder was so brutal and so personal. To go as far as to strangling someone after you've already slit their throat, that is overkill and that is personal, and that shows signs of rage and anger. So authorities wanted to look into Vera's personal life because they wanted to see if there was anyone who could have had a problem with Vera, anyone that she got into a fight with, anyone that she might have rejected who felt like they needed to get payback. And when they looked into Vera's life, they really couldn't find that much. Vera was described as a happy-go-lucky woman. She was a single mom. She loved her kids. She was very family-oriented. Now, when it came to Vera's social life, what authorities did find is that Vera spent a lot of time at the Roland Truck Stop Motel that was located not far from her home. Now, this is where she spent most of her time socializing, and she visited there several times a week and had several steady relationships form with some of the truck drivers that she met there over the years. Now, Lorraine said that Vera was the most popular person at this truck stop. Everyone loved Vera there. And when authorities looked deeper into this, they were able to figure out that Vera at the time of her death was actually dating someone. She was dating a man that she met at the Roland Truck Stop Motel, and this man would spend every Friday night with Vera. However, after the Friday, he would then go back and spend time with his wife and kids. So this man was clearly having an affair with Vera. Now, from what I've been able to gather, his wife and kids, so his family lived in England, so he would travel to where Vera was, and then after spending the Friday night with Vera, he would then go back to England and spend time with his family. Now, the general consensus of Vera's death is that Vera knew the person who murdered her that night. Whoever called Vera that night to see her, if they weren't responsible, why not just come forward and say, yeah, I was with her that night. I was the one who made the phone call, but I left after a certain point, or after we left the Crown and Cushion pub. If it was them that was there, I didn't see her, or she went off. She said she was going to do something else. It's very clear that whoever called Vera that night called her with the intention of murdering her. And it's clear that whoever called Vera that night had enough of an impact on her to get her to leave her house and give her son to her neighbor to babysit for a little bit when this was not planned. This was a very impromptu thing. It's very, very clear that this person did have a big impact on Vera, whoever called her. Now, authorities have never been able to trace back the phone call. They've never been able to trace back who called Vera that night. Remember, this was in 1991, and I don't think that they had the technology clearly that we do today. One of three things happened. They traced back the phone call and it was a burner phone. They traced back the phone call and they weren't able to get anything out of it, or they didn't have the proper technology to trace back the phone call. I tried to look up when being able to trace back phone calls happened. However, I was not able to figure that out. So I don't know if at this particular time in 1991, if that was something that authorities were able to do, but that was something that I was thinking about while searching this case is, were they able to trace back this phone call? Because it seems that if they were able to trace back this phone call, they might be able to put two and two together as to who called Vera that night. But then the obvious thing is that if they were able to trace back the phone call, they would be able to see who called her. So clearly something is not linking here. And I'm thinking that they just weren't able to trace back the phone call because technology wasn't as developed back then. Now, another big question that has been brought up from this is, why did Vera clear out the trunk of her car? Clearly she did it because she was expecting to put something back there, because you wouldn't clear out the trunk of your car in as much of a hurry as she seemed to be in if there was no purpose. Clearly you're clearing out the trunk of your car for a reason. So what was she expecting to put back there? Now, one thing that I want to quickly touch on before we get into theories is the fact that Vera said that she was going to see her brother. That was not true. When Vera said she was going to see her brother, that was a lie. She was not going to see her brother that night. She just told her neighbor that. Authorities looked into the family, they looked into her brother, and there were no signs that they had absolutely anything to do with this. And it became clear to authorities very quickly that the brother story was just a cover-up. I just wanted to mention that because I know that you might be thinking, well, did the brother have something to do with it? Because she said she was going to see the brother, but she did not go and see her brother that night. That was just a cover-up. Now, what's frustrating about this case is we don't have a lot of information on it. Everything that I just told you is pretty much all the information that we have. And what's frustrating is we don't really know what happened after Vera left her house that night in between the 5-hour span from when she left to when her body was discovered. She could have gone to the Crown and Cushion pub, but maybe she didn't. Maybe she just went somewhere completely different and there was a girl that just looked like Vera at the Crown and Cushion. All we know is that Vera left her house that night. We don't know who she went to see, and we don't know where she went when she left. So let's talk about potential theories. So when I read that Vera was dating a man who had a family, who had a wife, who had children, things started to make a little bit more sense, at least in my mind. It started to piece together possible theories, because before I read that, I was like, literally, who could have done this? Because it makes no sense. She's a single mom. She stays in her own lane. She doesn't seem to bother anyone. She doesn't have any known enemies. Everyone who knows her says she doesn't have enemies. So who could have possibly done this? However, when you hear that she's dating a married man, I'm sure there is a lot deeper of a backstory than the public knows. However, when I read that, I thought it was very possible that there could be a connection between the man that she was dating and Vera's death. Whether that was Vera threatening to make their affair public if she wanted to date him publicly or if he did something to make her mad and they had a fight and she said that she was going to come forward with their affair and the man didn't know what to do, so he decided to murder her in order to keep her quiet. When I think about who could have had a big enough impact to lure her out of her house that night, I think about the man that she could have been dating. I feel like that could have been very much a person that could have lured her out of her house that night. However, it also brings into question, why wouldn't she just ask him to come to her home instead? But maybe he gave her a proposition. Maybe he said he wanted to talk over drinks at the bar, or maybe he said he wanted to go for a drive with her. There's a lot of different things that could have happened. I also went as far as thinking maybe the wife found out and she hired a hitman. However, when I thought about that, I thought that that didn't really make a lot of sense, because Vera's not going to leave her home and bring her son over to her neighbor's house if some stranger calls her on the phone. However, another theory could have been the wife of this man that Vera was dating could have called Vera and asked her to talk. And she could have said, I'm not mad, I just want to know what the deal is, I want to know what's up. And Vera could have said, okay, and could have left the house for that reason, and it could have been a total setup. Now, I feel like that's a little bit of a reach, but I don't want to leave any stone left unturned. Now, another theory is maybe there was someone at the Roland Truck Stop Motel who liked Vera, who had a crush on Vera. Maybe they had a history together, maybe they had a past, or maybe Vera just rejected them flat out, and this could have triggered them enough to wanting to murder her in order to feel superior again. This theory made sense to me when I thought about the witnesses at the Crown and Cushion pub saying that they didn't look like they were on a date, and they didn't look like they were affectionate, and it didn't look like they were flirting with each other, but it didn't look like they never met each other before. It looked like they were acquaintances. That theory makes sense to me, because then they would just be sitting across from each other talking. However, I do think that if this was the case, that there would have been a sign of sexual assault, because just from past cases that we have done, when someone feels rejected, they want to get full dominance back and they want to feel superior again, and they will typically sexually assault their victim. However, Vera was not sexually assaulted. So those are my theories, and I'm just really interested to hear your guys' theories and what you guys think could possibly have happened. So let me know your theories in the comments below. Now, the fact of the matter is that it has been 29 years since Vera's death, and there is still no justice for her or her family. According to Lorraine, she has said, quote, "The murderers are still out there. That's the problem. That's what is really frustrating for her grandkids and for me. They are still out there walking around. They could be on the same street, in the same town. It just makes you feel angry and frustrated. I would like for the murderers to come forward. I think it would be good if they did. As time goes on, I think there's more than one person who knows about it. Just through the injuries my mom had, it's hard to imagine that this was just one person. If there was more than one person, it would be hard to keep quiet. Somebody obviously knows something." Now, Vera's family is very hopeful that 29 years later, with the new developments in technology, that her case will get solved and she will receive the justice that she deserves. It's scary to think that someone who is capable of such a horrific crime could still be walking free and is still not being held responsible for this horrific, terrible act. So I am very, very, very interested to hear what you guys have to say about this one. So let me know in the comments below what your theories are. And with that being said, you guys, that is all for me today. Thank you so much for tuning in to another true crime video here on my YouTube channel. If you're new here, hi, my name is Savannah. I make videos 3 days a week, Sunday, Tuesday, Thursday. You should subscribe and join the family. I love you guys so much, and I'll be back in a couple days with a brand new one. Bye, guys.